Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something a little different.
Oh,
Yeah, we're going to be diving into the world of online opinions about female celebrities,
okay.
but specifically celebrities born after 1976.
Interesting.
Yeah. So our main source for this is going to be a list from the top10s.com,
Okay.
and the list is called Ugliest Female Celebrities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just a heads up to our listeners before we get into this.
Yeah.
The language in these comments that we're going to be reading,
Oh, I bet.
it's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
So, uh,
I can imagine.
but that's actually what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right?
Absolutely.
Like what makes people feel so strongly
Right.
about celebrity looks that they go online and write some of the things that we're about to read.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question to keep in mind as we go through this.
Right.
Because it really does make you think about why people are so invested in these kinds of discussions.
Sure.
It's not just about physical features, I don't think.
Yeah.
There's something more going on there.
Definitely. And that's kind of what we're going to try to unpack today, right?
Absolutely.
Like, are these comments purely about how these celebrities look?
Right.
Or is there something more going on?
Yeah, is there like a deeper cultural or societal kind of element to this?
Exactly.
Like, what are the underlying messages here?
Yeah, are these opinions just like purely subjective, or is there something else influencing them?
Right.
And, as an expert in this field,
Yeah.
what are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like, I think it is definitely more complicated than just like surface level judgments, you know?
Okay.
What's interesting to me is how these comments can reveal a lot about our culture's expectations of women, especially women in the public eye.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of start unpacking that.
Yeah.
So at the top of this ugliest celebrities list, we have Kaylee Cuoco,
Okay.
followed very closely by Kim Kardashian
Uh-huh.
and Miley Cyrus.
Interesting.
What are your thoughts on that lineup?
Well, all three of them are incredibly successful in their own right, but they've
Yeah.
also been in the spotlight for years.
Oh, for sure.
And their images are constantly being like dissected and debated in the media and online.
Right.
So I think that level of scrutiny definitely plays a role in how people perceive them.
So it's not just about their looks, it's also about their image and how they're perceived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
For example, one of the comments about Kaylee Cuoco calls her a skank
Oh, wow.
with chipmunk cheeks and thunder thighs.
Oh, my goodness.
And then there's another one about Kim Kardashian that describes her as a fata
Wow.
with a rear end the size of Texas.
Oh, my.
And it says she has no talent.
So those are some pretty loaded words.
Right. Yeah. And they're not really just about physical features, are they?
Not at all. No.
It's like they're trying to find ways to justify their dislike by attacking her looks.
It seems that way, yeah.
Even though those are like totally subjective,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly.
So to say that someone is objectively ugly is just
It's kind
kind of strange.
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting from like a sociological perspective, you know? Like
Okay.
these comments kind of suggest this underlying expectation
Yeah.
that attractive women should also be likable and non-threatening.
Oh, interesting.
And if a woman is seen as like stepping outside of those boundaries,
Okay.
whether it's through her career choices or her personality,
Huh?
or even just like daring to be confident and successful,
Yeah.
suddenly her looks become a target.
So it's almost like a way to control or punish women who don't fit into those narrow boxes.
It could be seen that way, yeah.
Wow, that's a fascinating point.
It's a way to police women's behavior and their image.
Hmm.
And it's something we see again and again throughout history, you know?
It's a recurring theme.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's shift gears a bit and look at some other names further down the list.
Okay.
Like Megan Fox, Paris Hilton, Zooey Deschanel. The comments about them seem to really focus in on very specific features.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like noses, legs, you name it.
Huh.
There's one person who's fixated on Megan Fox's pointy nose,
Okay.
while another one goes on and on about Zooey Deschanel's huge nose and tree trunk legs.
Wow, so it's like really specific.
Yeah, why this obsession with individual features?
Well, I think it really boils down to the power of beauty standards.
Okay.
You know, we as a culture, we have all these often unspoken ideals
Yeah.
about what's considered beautiful. And
Yeah.
those ideals are reinforced constantly through the media, advertising,
Yeah.
even our own social circles.
Right.
And when someone deviates from those very narrow standards,
Yeah.
their differences are magnified.
Yeah.
And they often become the focus of criticism.
That makes sense.
It's like anything that falls outside of that very narrow definition of beauty
Right.
becomes like a target.
Yeah. And I find it so interesting how subjective those standards really are.
Oh, absolutely.
Because for every comment criticizing Megan Fox's nose,
Uh-huh.
there's another one praising it as her best feature.
Exactly.
So how do we reconcile this idea of universal beauty standards with the fact that beauty is so clearly in the eye of the beholder?
That's a really good question, and I think it speaks to this deeper tension that we're always dealing with when we talk about beauty.
Yeah.
On the one hand, yes, individual preferences exist,
Yeah.
but those preferences aren't formed in a vacuum.
Right.
They're shaped by the dominant cultural narratives,
Okay.
by what we're repeatedly exposed to as, like, desirable or undesirable.
Oh, that's interesting.
So even when we think we're making, like, a purely personal judgment, we're actually being influenced by this whole web of societal forces.
So we're all swimming in this sea of images and messages.
Yes.
And it's hard to completely disentangle our own tastes from those influences.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
It's like a constant bombardment of information and images
Right.
that shapes our perceptions, whether we realize it or not.
All right, let's talk about a celebrity who brings up a whole other dimension to this conversation.
Okay.
Nicki Minaj.
All right.
The comments about her aren't just about specific features. It's about her perceived authenticity.
Oh, interesting.
Like, one commenter even goes so far as to say that everything about her is fake and ugly,
Wow.
directly tying her perceived lack of authenticity to her attractiveness.
That's really interesting because it highlights this growing suspicion of anything that's seen as artificial or overly perfected when it comes to beauty.
Yeah.
There's this idea that if you've had work done, you're somehow cheating or trying to be something you're not.
Yeah.
And that can actually make people view you as less attractive, even if you technically fit conventional beauty standards.
It's like a backlash against this unattainable image of perfection that we're constantly bombarded with.
Right, especially on social media.
Yeah.
It's like people are starting to crave more authenticity,
Yeah.
even if it means, like, embracing imperfections.
So is this a sign that those rigid beauty standards are starting to crack?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a growing awareness of the harm that these unrealistic standards can cause.
Okay.
And that's definitely a positive step.
Yeah.
We are seeing more diverse representations of beauty in the media. We're seeing more celebrities speaking out about body positivity.
Yeah.
And more people are challenging these narrow definitions of what's considered attractive.
I hope that trend continues because it's really refreshing to see.
Me too.
Now, before we move on to some other fascinating names on this list,
Yeah.
I want to touch on something you said earlier about how these comments can reveal a lot about our cultural expectations of women.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that these comments aren't just random opinions. They're reflections of deeply ingrained social norms and beliefs about gender, beauty, and power. And so by analyzing the language that's used, the specific criticisms that are leveled, and even the celebrities who were targeted, we can gain valuable insights into how our society views and judges women.
Especially those who dare to be visible and successful.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really important point to keep in mind as we continue this deep dive.
Definitely.
Because it's not just about these individual celebrities.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the broader societal context
Absolutely.
in which these judgments are being made.
Yeah, and the potential impact those judgments can have, not just on the individuals, but on society as a whole.
Absolutely. And that's something we're going to continue exploring in part 2 of this deep dive.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So stay tuned, everyone.
Yes.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Sounds good. And it's not just about individual women either.
No, you're right.
These judgments can have like a ripple effect, They can influence how we perceive and interact with women as a whole.
It's true if we're constantly bombarded with messages that certain women are ugly or undesirable.
Right.
It's bound to seep into our subconscious and affect our perceptions of women in general.
Absolutely. And it can contribute to this culture where women are constantly being evaluated and judged based on their appearance.
Which is incredibly damaging.
Oh, for sure. It can really impact their self-esteem and their sense of worth.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought.
It is.
Okay, let's dive back into the list
Okay.
and look at some specific examples.
All right.
I'm curious about Mila Kunis and Katy Perry
Yeah.
because the comments about them are all over the map.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some people call them ugly, while others passionately defend their looks.
Interesting.
One commenter even says that Mila Kunis has something unique and attractive about her,
Okay.
while another describes Katy Perry as a classic beauty.
It just goes to show you how subjective beauty really is.
Exactly what one person finds appealing, another might find completely unappealing.
Right. And our perceptions of beauty are shaped by so many different factors.
Like what?
Well, our personal experiences,
Okay.
our cultural backgrounds,
Uh-huh.
even our own individual moods and preferences at any given moment.
It's so complex.
It really is.
But amidst all this subjectivity,
Yeah.
are there any underlying patterns or trends that emerge from these comments?
Definitely. One thing that jumps out at me is the emphasis on youthfulness.
Okay.
A lot of the negative comments target women who are perceived as, like, aging poorly or not aging gracefully.
Oh, interesting.
For example, there are multiple comments criticizing Katherine Heigl's appearance, with one commenter stating that she should be ranked higher on the ugliest list.
Wow. It's interesting how that standard seems to be applied more harshly to women than to men.
Oh, absolutely.
Like men are often seen as becoming more distinguished or attractive with age,
Right.
while women are expected to fight against the natural aging process.
It's a classic double standard.
It is.
And it really speaks to this deeper cultural anxiety about women's power and visibility as they age.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The comments about the Olsen twins,
Okay.
they go beyond just physical critiques
Mm-hmm.
and delve into their fashion choices and overall lifestyle.
Interesting.
Like one commenter calls them creepy and haggard,
Mm.
while another criticizes their bony-ass hippie look.
Wow.
It's like their perceived transformation from child stars to adults
Right.
has been met with this mix of fascination and disapproval.
It's almost as if they're being punished for not conforming to the traditional Hollywood narrative of how women should age.
Yeah, their individuality and unconventional style are seen as a threat to that narrative.
Exactly. It's like they've dared to step outside the bounds of what's considered acceptable for
Right.
women in the public eye.
And the backlash is fierce.
Oh, yeah. And their case also highlights the unique challenges faced by former child stars.
Okay.
They're often held to this impossible standard,
Yeah.
expected to maintain the same youthful image that made them famous,
Uh-huh.
even as they grow and evolve as individuals.
It's like we're holding on to this idealized version of them from their childhood,
Right.
and we're resistant to seeing them change and mature.
It's a form of nostalgia, but it can also be incredibly limiting and even harmful to the individuals involved.
Yeah. It can stifle their creativity,
Absolutely.
their personal growth, their ability to forge their own path.
Exactly.
It's a powerful reminder of the need to allow individuals, especially those in the public eye,
Yes.
the space and freedom to evolve and redefine themselves over time.
And to challenge our own assumptions about how people should age or behave.
So we've talked about the subjectivity of beauty, the power of cultural standards,
Uh-huh.
the double standards faced by women, and the unique pressures faced by former child stars.
All right.
Are there any other major themes that emerge from this list and the accompanying commentary?
One thing that strikes me is the sheer volume of negativity and cruelty
Yes.
directed at these women.
It's really disheartening.
It is, and it's easy to dismiss these comments as just internet trolls being mean.
Right.
But I think there's something more insidious at play here.
I agree. It's like there's this collective need to tear down successful women,
Yes.
to find flaws and imperfections, to diminish their accomplishments.
And I think it speaks to this deeper societal discomfort
Ah.
with women who are powerful, who are visible, who are challenging traditional gender roles.
It's almost like a way to put them back in their place,
Right.
to remind them that they're not allowed to be too confident, too successful, too different.
And that's a dangerous and damaging message to send both to these women and to society as a whole.
It reinforces the idea that women should be seen and not heard,
Exactly.
that their worth is tied to their appearance,
Uh-huh.
and that they should strive to please others rather than themselves.
It's all about control and maintaining the status quo.
So how do we combat this negativity? How do we shift the conversation around beauty and create a more positive and inclusive culture?
Well, it's a complex issue, for sure.
But I think it starts with awareness.
Yeah, okay.
We need to be more mindful of the messages we're internalizing, both consciously and subconsciously,
Yeah.
about beauty and womanhood.
So being more critical of the media we consume,
Yes,
the images we share, the language we use,
exactly. Those are all important steps.
challenging those unrealistic beauty standards whenever we encounter them.
Absolutely. We need to call out airbrushing and filters, celebrate diverse body types, and promote a more inclusive definition of beauty.
It's about expanding our idea of what's considered beautiful
Right.
to include all shapes, sizes, colors, and ages.
And beyond just challenging those external standards,
Mhm.
I think it's equally important to focus on building up women's internal sense of worth.
How do we do that?
By encouraging girls and women to value themselves for their intelligence, their creativity, their kindness, their strength,
Okay.
for all the qualities that make them unique and valuable individuals regardless of how they look. It's about shifting the focus from external validation to internal strength and self-acceptance.
Precisely. And that's something we can all work on,
Yeah?
both individually and collectively.
What are some ways we can do that?
Well, we can support organizations that empower women.
Okay.
We can challenge sexist language and stereotypes.
Uh-huh.
And we can celebrate women's accomplishments in all areas of life.
It's about creating a culture where girls and women feel seen, heard, and valued for who they are, not just for how they look.
Exactly. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a long-term project.
Yeah.
It's going to take time and effort to dismantle these deeply ingrained beliefs
Right.
and create a truly equitable and inclusive society.
But it's a fight worth having.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately it's about creating a world where everyone, regardless of gender or appearance,
Yes.
has the opportunity to reach their full potential and live a fulfilling and meaningful life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that true beauty lies not in conforming to some arbitrary standard, but in embracing our individuality and celebrating the diversity of human experience.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
But before we go, I want to leave you with this final thought.
All right.
Think about the comments we've explored today and ask yourself, how much do your own judgments about beauty or even ugliness go beyond simple physical appearance? And more importantly, how can you challenge those judgments and embrace a more expansive and inclusive view of beauty? Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking exploration, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Wow, it's been quite a journey going through this list.
It has.
And honestly, it's a bit disheartening,
Yeah.
to see the level of negativity directed at these women.
It's really something.
But I think what's even more disturbing is
Yeah.
how much of it seems rooted in this idea that a woman's worth is tied to her appearance.
Absolutely. You've hit on a really crucial point there.
Yeah?
It's not just about these individual insults.
Right.
It's about this underlying message that
Uh-huh.
a woman's value is primarily determined by how she looks.
And that message is everywhere.
It's pervasive in our culture.
It's like everywhere you look, right?
Yeah.
Magazines, movies, social media,
Oh, absolutely.
they're all constantly feeding us these images of ideal beauty.
Right. And it's easy to start internalizing those messages without even realizing it.
Yeah, and those messages can be incredibly damaging.
Oh, for sure, especially for young people who
Right.
are still developing their sense of self.
It's like we're setting them up
Yeah.
to feel inadequate, to constantly compare themselves to these unrealistic ideals.
Right.
And to believe that their worth is tied to their physical appearance.
And the consequences of that can be devastating.
Yeah.
Low self-esteem, body image issues, eating disorders.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
It is. It's a serious issue.
So what can we do about it?
Well,
How do we start to shift this narrative?
yeah.
Create a more positive and inclusive culture?
Well, I think it starts with awareness.
We need to be more conscious of the messages that we're consuming and promoting.
So being more critical of the media we consume,
Yeah.
the images we share,
Uh-huh.
the language we use,
Exactly. Those are all important steps.
and challenging those unrealistic beauty standards whenever we encounter them.
Absolutely. We need to call out airbrushing and filters,
Right.
celebrate diverse body types, and promote a more inclusive definition of beauty.
It's about expanding our idea of what's considered beautiful to include all shapes,
Yes.
sizes, colors, and ages.
Absolutely.
And beyond just challenging those external standards,
Uh-huh.
I think it's equally important to focus on building up women's internal sense of worth.
I hear it completely.
How do we do that?
Well, by encouraging girls and women to value themselves for their intelligence, their creativity, their kindness, their strength.
Right.
For all the qualities that make them unique and valuable individuals,
Yeah.
regardless of how they look.
It's about shifting the focus from external validation to internal strength and self-acceptance.
Precisely. And that's something we can all work on,
Yeah.
both individually and collectively.
Right. Are there any specific actions that we can take to sort of promote that?
Sure, we can support organizations that empower women.
Okay.
We can challenge sexist language and stereotypes.
Uh-huh.
And we can celebrate women's accomplishments in all areas of life.
It's about creating a culture where girls and women feel seen, heard,
Yes.
and valued for who they are, not just for how they look.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a long-term project, you know?
Sure.
It's going to take time and effort
Right.
to dismantle these deeply ingrained beliefs
Yeah.
and create a truly equitable and inclusive society.
But it's a fight worth having,
Absolutely.
because ultimately it's about creating a world where everyone, regardless of gender or appearance, has the opportunity to reach their full potential and live a fulfilling and meaningful life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about recognizing that true beauty lies not in conforming to some arbitrary standard, but in embracing our individuality and celebrating the diversity of human experience.
So well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with this final thought.
Right.
Think about all the comments we've explored today.
Yeah.
And ask yourself, how much do your own judgments about beauty or even ugliness go beyond simple physical appearance?
That's a good question.
And more importantly, how can you challenge those judgments
Right.
and embrace a more expansive and inclusive view of beauty? Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking exploration, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.